Cush Sovereignty, Black Righteousness by L. James Bolin. Chapter 2 Part 1, Samuel and Cush. On this day in 3190, Samuel took his grandson Cush to a nearby creek early that morning. Cush thought they were going fishing. By this time, he was 10 years old. As a child he was unable to pronounce granddaddy and started calling his grandfather, Dandaddy. Cush asked, "Dandaddy, do you want me to go and round up some bamboo for our fishing poles?" Samuel smiled, "Today, we will not fish, today is a day of learning. You're of the age now that I can teach you some of the things that I want you to know as a man." Cush looked up at his grandfather. "What is it, Dandaddy?" Samuel pointed to a nearby log. "There, sit down." A small mound of sand, leaves, and sticks was just a few feet in the middle of the creek. He grabbed a large rock and threw it into the creek, saying, "What do you see?" The boy was confused, shook his shoulders, "Nothing." He waited for an hour, repeated it with an even larger rock, and then asked again, "What do you see?" Cush made up things hoping to guess what his grandfather was trying to say, but Samuel just smiled. After hours of sitting there and repeating the same thing, the sun was on top of them. Cush became very impatient with his grandfather, for he was hungry as his stomach growled. "Tell me, Dandaddy, because I don't know, all I see are those ants keep trying to go to the other side and you keep messing them up with those rocks. The bigger the rock, the harder it is for them to rebuild. They're probably mad at you by now." Samuel laughed so hard he cried. Wiping the tears from his eyes, "My dear son, I wanted you to see the little things, the details, and all this time, you did. This lesson has two things I want you to remember in life. Look," he pointed to the ants, "you were right, each time I threw the rocks in the water, they continued to come toward the shore by making themselves in a circle of floating ants. Some die, but they kept doing it, and the larger the rock, the wider it spreads the ripples out. They remained determined to make it to shore even after I built barriers in their way, they continued to make it to shore, but the only way is by sticking together in harmony." He paused as his grandson smiled, then continued, "Life is the same way. Still, one cannot make it in this life without patience and harmony." Cush looked puzzled. "I don't understand, what's the second lesson, Dandaddy?" Samuel reached down and grabbed his grandson by the chin, shaking it softly. "Never give up, no matter the obstacles." As they were walking back, Samuel said, "When you were in your mother's womb, I had a dream that you would become a great man, and therefore, I named you Cush. Your mother wanted to name you a Johnny in honor of me. It's my nickname, but I said no, you should be named Cush." Cush looked up. "Why Cush, Dandaddy?" Samuel stopped in the middle of the path. "Well, our family has had many great people in it. Many of whom were prominent men and women who served Sabaoth with honor and respect, not all but many. 150 years ago, there was a prophecy that went forth that one day Sabaoth will bring forth a man from our family who will bring the great deceiver and his followers to his knees. He will be the first man to kill and destroy demons, and no man has done such a thing other than Nshika, but Nshika was a special man. I felt deeply that that man is you according to my dream." Cush looked at his grandfather with a serious look. "Tell me about your dream, Dandaddy." Samuel laughed so hard. "You going to interpret my dreams for me?" Cush was excited. "Yes." Samuel took a seat nearby. "Well, I was sitting at the river, and my father and my grandfather appeared before me, then his father and his father's father and his father, about 15 generations were coming to the river, one by one, and we all stood there talking to each other. Suddenly, it got dark, we couldn't see any light but the stars above us. We all stood in the dark for a long time before Wanyenyekevu, our ancestor, stood up and pointed at a light. The light grew bigger and bigger and consumed the darkness. This light was so strong it blinded us for a short time, and afterward, we could hear a voice, it echoed. 'He is here.' And I woke up. The next morning your mother announced that she was pregnant." Cush said. Sounds interesting." Samuel got up laughing. "Boy, come on here, let's go home." They were half a mile from home, and Samuel said to Cush, "I see you have friends teaching you to fight." Surprised, Cush said, "No, they are my make-believe friends, but there is one who shows no emotion, not really, he has a made-up half-smile. It looks as if he is making himself smile." Samuel laughed out loud again. Yes, I know him, his name is Yael, but they are real and not make-believe. Cush laughed. Yael makes me laugh, but he is always very serious. Samuel stopped. Come, let me tell you a true story of one of your ancestors, the one that stood up in my dream named Wanyenyekevu. Cush was excited. Wanyenyekevu? Samuel said, it's pronounced Wanyenyekevu. Cush nodded, okay, Wanyenyekevu. But Mama would not like it if I come home too late without letting her know where I'm at. Samuel said. Have you forgotten she's my daughter? I will take care of that. Cush smiled. No, I didn't forget. Samuel walked to a nearby tree. Family is a solid component in our life and should be treated as such, not to say everyone in the family feels that way, but even they, like this tree, will soon die off and break from the family like this branch. They have served their purpose, whether big or small, but all must die for this tree to grow. As he pointed to a branch that fell from the tree, saying, those that make the family strong will continue to help the tree grow, not to say that you only need family, you will find friends that will treat you better than some family members. These friends should and will be a part of your family. Cush interrupted Samuel. Dandati? Samuel looked at Cush, because of the look he had on his face. Yes? Cush said as politely as he could, can we talk about this while we eat? I'm hungry enough to eat that tree, Samuel said with a smile. Let's go eat. Samuel and Cush entered the house as Samuel yelled out to Martha. Baby, I have Cush with me. Do you mind making us something to eat and sending someone over to tell Miriam that Cush is with me? Samuel sat down and Cush beside him. Martha came up to the front, wiping her hands dry. What are you yelling for, old man? I'm right here in the kitchen. She smiled at Cush. Baby, what would you like to eat? Cush replied, anything you cook is all right with me, Big Ma. She replied, I just finished roasting a rabbit smothered in vegetables, rice, and some cornbread. How does that sound? Cush quickly said. Sounds good to me. She smiled. You'll go and wash up, and it will be here by the time you get back. Cush almost knocked down his grandfather while trying to get to the bathroom. Excuse me, Dandati, he shouts. Sure enough, by the time they returned, Big Ma was placing Cush's plate on a stand. He bowed his head for a second and said grace, and ate. Slow down before you hurt yourself, Samuel said. Before long, Martha returned with a bigger plate for Samuel. Thanks, babe, he smiled and rubbed her behind as she returned. Taking a towel she had in her hand, she softly popped him. We got company. Samuel smiled, not for long if you keep walking like that. Blushing, she said. Dirty old man. Trying to act as if he saw nothing, Cush continued to eat. Cush looked at Samuel. Dandati, I read a lot of your stuff, some I understand and some, not so much. Samuel smiled. We come from a long line of poets and songwriters, hell, artist period. Which one you didn't understand? Cush, wiping his mouth with his hands. Snakes in the grass, Samuel said. Well, at your age, you probably haven't had to deal with dishonesty or disrespectful people who call themselves friends. When you do, it will all fall in line.